Ezekiel Abaddon, the Despoiler, the first captain of the Luna Wolves, the master of the Black Legion, the prime fear of the Imperium. With the 13th Black Crusade in full effect, we've finally seen this character come back into the light at the head of a host of demons, traitor legions, and warships. But who is he? Why did he fail 12 times before this? Today, we're going to discuss Abaddon the Despoiler and his long history as a legionnaire in the Great Crusade to the leader of the largest force of the Chaos Space Marines in the Eye of Terror. So join me, starting with pre-Horus Heresy. We know that Abaddon was born on Thonia, the homeworld of the Luna Wolves. Thank late 1980s sci-fi trends for that hallmark of a name that undoubtedly strikes fear into weeaboos far and wide. Abaddon was a pretty ferocious badass from the start of things, killing his dad in a coming-of-age ritual. This went on to help him in his service as a space marine. He quickly progressed to first captain, and then eventually the head of the Mournival, this small group of captains that act as Horus Lupercal's personal bodyguard and closest counsel. One of Abaddon's most epic moments was during the Ulnar campaign, when Horus and a contingent of First Company Terminators stormed the tower of the Orc war boss Urlak Urg. While Horus went to confront the war boss, Abaddon and the Terminators held the entrance of the tower. When Horus came back, Abaddon was the only Terminator alive, barely standing with a mountain of orcs heaped up at his waist. He's kind of like, they talk about like half his body is completely broken. It's pretty fucking metal. As the Horus Heresy broke out, Abaddon became more and more temperamental. One of my favorite lines is from False Gods, when Abaddon is furious about Horus being wounded and near death. I believe it's Tarek Torgadon that says it to Abaddon, and it's along the lines or of the effect of, you must not let your collar raise so, or else you will never come back. And it was a sort of foreshadowing to the Abaddon we see throughout the Heresy, this sort of highly aggressive warrior, prone to bouts of extreme anger, but one of the best fighters in the galaxy as a whole, feared on one hand and admired on the other. And Abaddon was absolutely the first to bend the knee to Horus after he falls to chaos. But you could really argue that Horus fell in line more with Abaddon's view than the other way around. Abaddon was very much of the mindset that human lives were expendable and below the Legionnaires. Abaddon was already a firm member of the warrior lodges that Erebus had, or the first chaplain Erebus of the Word Bearers, that he had set up to help propagate throughout the legions. Now, the point of these lodges was so that the legionnaires could talk on equal footing without the burden of the chain of command. But it was a means to force a pro-marine agenda wherein the humans were seen as chaff or cattle, inconsequential compared to the glory of a marine. And if he wasn't so unwaveringly dedicated to Horus, Abaddon really would have made for a great world eater. And I like to think of him as a world eater without the butcher's nails and with the clarity of thought of a military commander. So, not a world eater. But, that berserker is still there under the surface. That attitude becomes tempered, though, with the fall of his father. After the defeat of Horus at the hands of the Emperor, Abaddon goes mad, and the heresy comes to an abrupt close. After the heresy, Abaddon was a broken man. He wandered the Eye of Terror, taking the former War Master's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, with him, and disappearing from history entirely. For years, he went unheard from until the Emperor's children attacked Lupercalios, the sons of Horus' fortress deep in the Eye of Terror. They successfully stole the dead body of Horus with the intention of having Fabius Bile clone him. Now, to spare you a lot of the details of the first of the Aaron Dembski-Bowden's new trilogy on the Black Legion, which I strongly recommend you to read, Abaddon is roused from his self-imposed exile and attacks the Emperor's children. And there's some really amazing points in that book, like when Iskander K and co. Discover the Vengeful Spirit. And you have to remember, this is a Gloriana-class starship. Not only is it the largest Imperial warship, but the only things larger than it were the Phalanx, which is the Imperial Fist's fortress monastery, and the Furious Abyss class starships, of which only 3 were ever made. In addition, the Mechanicus has lost the standard template construct and the technology and means to make these kind of massive floating cities. I mean, these were meant for the Legiones Astartes as they kind of brought the Emperor's light to the stars and spanned 20-some kilometers in length. So, to put this into perspective, the largest Imperial naval vessel in service now is an Apocalypse-class warship at 12 kilometers. So, quite the difference. So imagine seeing one of these legendary vessels that people haven't seen in centuries, from a time when they were commonplace, emerge from out of this massive gas cloud as kind of like a herald of things to come, more or less. Anyway, once Abaddon is galvanized to join the center stage once more, he attacks the Emperor's children and Fabius File's cloning labs. And there, he discovers all 20 of the Primarchs have been cloned. Then he kills them all, before coming face to face with his fallen father, Horus. Now, Abaddon uses the talent of Horus to destroy Worldbreaker, Horus's power maul, then runs his Gene Father through. And there's a moment of clarity where Horus realizes who Abaddon is, and even calls out to him, calls him his son. And this is this kind of pivotal turning point from broken mind to hardened, determined killer that becomes the new War Master, right? He looks down into his dying father's eyes and says, "I am not your son." So it's an epic moment where Abaddon is born again, reforged in his own light with his own ambitions, and not someone else's for a change. And I'm sure there's a fucking moment where confetti, a kazoo goes off, and a cheeky congratulations that happens. But now begins the long war, the 10 millennia long siege of the Imperium from the forces of chaos. The Sons of Horus are reborn as the Black Legion, tossing Horus's name into the dirt. And the Black Legion assumes the stance that Horus was weak, and they repaint their armor and rename their legion to both remove the taint of Horus from their legion, including his great failure. And he slowly brought the rest of the Sons of Horus into his new legion, creating one of the largest unified forces of chaos in the Eye of Terror, his innermost circle being named the Ezkarian. An interesting thing here, though, the lore talks about how he brings warbands into the fold as well as demon primarchs. And I don't know, yeah, Abaddon's Abaddon, but if I'm perturbed with the demon primarch, I'm like, go away. You're annoying me. You have a top knot. But here's a cool fact about the Black Legion. They're not all exclusively Sons of Horus. In fact, any traitor marine can choose to abandon their parent legion, or if they're in exile, or if they've been banished, anything like that, and then take up the colors of the Black Legion. And this is what happened with Iskander Kayan, who was 1,000 Suns originally. In the Night Lords trilogy, we see a former Night Lords as a member of the Black Legion. This is what has kept the Legion so large after all these engagements, crusades, and infighting. And additionally, you can be press-ganged into the Legion, forced to fight for Abaddon at the cost of your life. So these aren't the most altruistic chaps in the world. They're not riding from planet to planet, ringing bells on their bicycles and selling Girl Scout cookies here. But after unifying the Legion, Abaddon led a number of crusades against the Imperium, with the first one being of significant import, as this showed the Imperium that the traitor legions could move in mass, and they were still, in fact, a very real threat. Abaddon ends up killing his old rival, the Emperor's champion, Sigismund, in single combat, and shortly after, he discovers the demon sword Drachnian from the Tower of Silence. And if you haven't read Master of Mankind, the Horus Heresy book, I strongly recommend it to discover the origins of that sword. Oh man. I just realized it. So I've talked about the Night Lords trilogy, the Master of Mankind, and the Black Legion trilogy, all written by Aaron Dembski Bowden. He kind of has a monopoly on writing very good chaos right now. So I can't stroke. I know there's another point where I'm going to mention him in this video. I fucking know it, but let's get back on track here. Now, the big critique for a long time was that if Abaddon is so testicle-shatteringly badass, then why is he on Crusade number 13? That's not very impressive. Well, as they've kind of fleshed out in some of the more later Chaos Space Marine codexes and army books, Abaddon is on what he calls the Crimson Path. This is the overarching plan to essentially widen the Eye of Terror to allow the traitor legions to move across the galaxy without the Eye of Terror being their main conduit in and out of the Imperium. Each of his many crusades has made Terra appear to be the target, but in actuality, Abaddon has other goals. The Fourth Crusade destroyed the Citadel of Cromach. The Sixth ended the Sons of the Eye, his direct competition to his War Master title. The Ninth, he destroyed the strategic naval base of Cassopolis. The 10th, he besieged Medusa with the help of Perturabo, there he is, finding out how Space Marines defend their planets and reducing the Iron Hands to a fraction of their strength. Then, the 12th Black Crusade, Abaddon captured 2 massive Blackstone fortresses from a time that predates Space Marines. So the earlier lore definitely had Abaddon being sort of just always foiled, all the time, in the way that it was typical for villains to be foiled repeatedly in the late 80s and early 90s, and like in the "I'll get you next time, Inspector Gadget" style of bullshit. Now, there have been a lot of changes in the lore from the old Abaddon to the Abaddon of now. It used to be that Cadia was so important and the object of every Black Crusade because it was the only major staging point that the Black Fleet could come out of the Eye of Terror at. This has since been changed, retconned, or outright ignored to fit the rule of cool. And really, you could make the argument that his intentions always seemed to be Terra, to pool resources in Terra or Cadia rather than the intended target of Abaddon's crusade. However you cut it though, all the crusades pale in comparison to his latest, the 13th Black Crusade. It's the masterful stroke that has led up to this point, and as the champion of the Chaos Gods, Abaddon has provided plenty of destruction to appease Nurgle, slaves for Slanesh, blood and bodies for Khorne, and widespread machinations to tickle the fezzas of Tzeentch. It all culminates in the fall of Cadia, a massive assault by the Black Fleet against the Cadian Gate, defended by some of the Imperium's greatest heroes and armies. And the real objective here is that Cadia is a pylon world, housing a number of ancient pylons built by the Necrons to reduce and prevent the Eye of Terror from growing and getting out of control and, syphilis. But the ultimate goal of the Crimson Path has come to this. Abaddon has to destroy the Cadian pylons to allow the Eye of Terror a rampant expansion, as the other pylon worlds have already been destroyed at this point. Although Abaddon was severely wounded on the surface of Cadia during the whole engagement, his mission was ultimately successful, diverting the wreckage of one of the Blackstone fortresses into the planet itself, destroying the pylons and sucking the planet into the warp, like a child sucking up a marble. Not that I've ever done that or did that, and my mom had to fish out the marble from my... Never mind. The Fall of Cadia is its own video, and I'd really like to get into the grittiness of that campaign because it's so fun and it's so epic. It's one of the first points that we've seen the history of the 40k universe progress. It was pretty massive for all of us, but this has a very immediate effect. The Eye of Terror explodes outwards, creating the Cicatrix Maledictum, the gigantic warp storm that effectively cuts the Imperium in half. The Galactic North divided into the Imperium Nihilus, or the Dark Imperium, completely cut off from the light of the Astronomicon. And for those of you that don't know, the Astronomicon is the guiding light of the Emperor, projected as a psychic beacon into the warp. This acts as a sort of North Star, sort of, for any of the Imperial navigators guiding their ship through the Immaterium. Without it, though, the warp travel is near impossible and extremely dangerous. As a quick side note, that's what the Emperor was trying to do, was remove the Imperium's reliance on that Astronomicon, or the warp for traveling. Now, the only way for the Dark Imperium to make contact and travel to the Greater Imperium is through the Nachmund Gauntlet, where near what's left of Cadia. So there's one planet, a sentinel world, that kind of stands watch on the Dark Imperium side, Vigilus. And as the story stands now, we're still waiting until the countdown where Abaddon attacks Vigilus. And that time is rapidly approaching. With less than a month's time from now, we'll soon see what this means. The big hope is that we're going to get a new Abaddon model, hopefully with arms that don't suck. But there are a number of talking points about Abaddon and his competency as a War Master. Aaron Dembski-Bowden, see I told you, really makes a great remark in an AMA about his writing of the character, stating that Abaddon is really, he's only in it for himself now, and while he does work with the Chaos Gods, he's not their pawn, not in the way that Horus was. He makes that distinction a lot, that he will not be controlled by the powers that be, even if it's unwittingly. And there's a notion that the Chaos Gods know that if Abaddon captures Terra, he'll forsake them and be Emperor 2.0. So the theory is that Chaos allows him to just have enough success to continue his crusades, but I think that Abaddon has a plan, a larger one, and we'll soon find out what that is. I mean, with Bobby G, Robot Guilliman in the picture now, he now has an actual Primarch to be up against, and that's quite the hurdle. So we'll see what this all kind of pans out to be. I bet you probably going to see Angren come back and the World Eaters, because the big thing, I think it's called the World Claimer or the World Destroyer or something like that. And that might mean that, the World Eaters are coming, who knows. But as we bring this to a close, here's a funny side story. Just last weekend, I went home to visit my parents. My mom goes, "One of your little guys fell out of his box," and all my old 3rd and 4th edition 40k shit is still at home. But who is it? Alone, primed Chaos Black, not painted, never painted, with both arms intact. Abaddon the Despoiler watches over the storage of the garage, planning his 14th Black Crusade to plunder endless Christmas decorations and bad baby photos. Either way, guys, that brings our tale to an end. Hopefully you now have a better idea of who Abaddon is, how he has grown from this hot-headed, tempestuous legionnaire to a self-serving, self-made, galaxy-threatening powerhouse. And I'm really looking forward to what March 5th brings us. But please leave a comment below if you have some big thoughts or theories on what it is that's coming around the corner for old failed Abaddon here. But love to just kind of hear your thoughts on this, guys, as always. But as always, guys, thanks for watching here today. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, all that action. If you're interested in watching and getting a better sense for what's going on with my Blood Angels army, I've been posting pretty regular updates as I paint and assemble the entirety of that in my Patreon. So you can go and check that out if you want. Don't feel obligated to, because you don't need to. But as always, guys, do have a good one, and take care.